forgot how much I hate Grace with my entire being. Hello everyone, it's the Ramen Noodle Goddess, and today I am going to be talking about Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. Now, when I talk about this book throughout the entire video, there are going to be spoilers, and plenty of them, because I don't know how to talk about books without spoiling them. So if you haven't read this book yet, don't watch this video, read this, and then come back. I'm going to be ranting it a little bit and kind of reviewing, but mostly ranting. That's usually what my videos consist of when I talk about books that I've read. I am a little late to the party because this book came out on March 2nd, but I was still doing my classes and stuff, so I didn't want to get distracted from that, so I waited until spring break to read it, and I finally finished it. It took me around probably like 4 days with doing work and other things, so it took me longer than it probably would have a couple of years ago, but a lot quicker than I was expecting, to be honest, because I haven't read very many books recently, and this is the first book that I've read in probably like 3 months cover to cover, and I forgot how like immersed I get, like so easily captivated by Cassandra Clare's books and her writing and the Shadowhunter world, and it was really, really nice to feel again. But let's get into the pain and tragedy I experienced while reading this novel. I have all of my notes on my laptop. I wrote like 3 pages of rant to talk to you guys about. The first note was I forgot how much I hate Grace because it's been so long since I've read Chain of Gold, and I don't have the greatest memory, especially when it comes to reading. And I was starting the book, and when it would shift to Grace's perspective or when it would shift to her past or anything, I was just like, oh my god, I hate your guts so much. Like, it was just a fiery passion inside me, and I was just like, oh my god, I want to kill you. Anyway, the one thing I wanted to talk about that I thought was really interesting that I even thought about in the first place was I noticed there was kind of an indirect like importance of Charles's character when it came to Matthew's character development. I don't know if anybody else really thought about this or not, but it was mostly surrounding the idea that, you know, Matthew was constantly saying, oh my god, I hate Charles, I hate my brother, he's so annoying, blah blah blah. And then when Charles was on like the brink of death, he had to admit that he loved him because he was his brother, even though he didn't like him, which I thought was really cute. Usually with Cassandra Clare's books, I do experience this. So from a writer's perspective, cutting off scenes that are really satisfying to read that lead to very unsatisfying and troubling scenes is absolute genius, but from a reader's perspective, it is an absolute nightmare, as I'm sure anyone else out there can relate. It was so terrible and so frustrating to read because obviously you love these characters for the most part and you want them to have a happily ever after and a happy ending, and most of the time that does not happen, especially in the middle of a series, because obviously if it was a happily ever after in the middle of a series, there wouldn't be the rest of the series. And something else I wanted to talk about is I cannot believe I didn't see it coming when, what was it, Belial? Oh yeah, when Jesse Blackthorn was the body that Belial was possessing, because the entire time I was like, you know, it's weird that James is having these dreams and the window is cracked open all the time whenever he sleeps and whenever there's a murder, but I really didn't think that it was gonna be James because I felt like that was kind of too easy, but I had no clue, and I thought it was so dramatic when it was revealed that it was Jesse Blackthorn, especially when the runes were found on him by Lucy, and that was shocking to learn that that was the reason the runes were disappearing in the first place was so that obviously Jesse's body could be strengthened enough to be used as a proper vessel for Belial. And then now I'm wondering, as I'm sure other people are, like, what the heck were those dreams coming from that James was having? Because obviously Belial kept saying that he didn't do that to James on purpose, and now I'm thinking maybe either James like unconsciously did it himself somehow, or maybe it had to do with him being able to possess Jesse's body or being able to dig into Belial's mind the way Belial is able to dig into James's. Like, there could be so many reasons, and I have no idea what Cassandra Clare has planned for that for the 3rd book, but it is really mind-boggling to think about because I can't figure out like the proper ending to that. I don't know the reasoning behind it. I also wrote in here that it was really satisfying to pretty much learn everything about Grace's past and how she was actually adopted and why she was adopted, and just how Tatiana treated her behind the scenes and basically raised this monster that we read about throughout the entire novel, and you know, using her for her demonic, like grotesque demonic purposes. And as much as Cassandra Clare wants me to pity her if that isn't in fact what she intended. I can't find it in me to pity her at all, and I think it's mostly because of the way Grace had manipulated James so much at such a young age that it kind of ruined every other aspect of his life. Not just that, you know, he didn't love Cordelia when he actually loved Cordelia, but literally all his relationships were falling apart, and his memories from everything from a young age is so cloudy now that he can barely remember them. And something that I found I had to come to terms with towards the end of the novel is that it was a little bit hard to not dislike Lucy a little bit, right towards the end of the novel, because she was getting so involved in Jesse's raising of Jesse using necromancy. And I know she was against necromancy at first, but then I think she just started getting really desperate because Jesse was fading, so she decided to go to Malcolm. And this next part, there are going to be spoilers that involve the Dark Artifices series, so if you haven't read that, and I don't know which book this is revealed in, so if you haven't read any part or certain parts of the Dark Artifices, skip to the minute time area that I'm going to put on the screen here, because there are going to be spoilers for that right now, so go ahead and skip. But anyway, Lucy just kept getting more and more desperate to raise Jesse from the dead, and you can tell, you know, she's obviously been keeping these secrets from everyone, and you can tell how hurt Daisy is by all the secrets that she's been keeping, especially when she finds out about those secrets. She's like, oh my god, I can't believe you didn't tell me. Like, I'm looking back on all of these memories and all of these events that happened in the previous book, and I'm like, it all makes sense now. You were keeping all this stuff from me, and now I don't know what to do about it, because we're supposed to be para-body, and I don't know anything about your life right now. Now they can't even talk about it because Lucy fled to Idris with Malcolm, and Daisy went to frickin' Paris with Matthew and left James behind because of other issues that I'll get to later. And it's also not, this is the part about the Dark Artifices, but it's also hard to not think about how all of this, with Lucy and Malcolm and Jesse and Grace, how it all spurred into action sort of Malcolm's process of raising Annabelle Blackthorne back from the dead from, like, God, I don't even know how many years ago it was. In this time frame from Chain of Iron, it was about 90 years ago, I think. But I don't know the time difference between now, from Chain of Iron, to the Dark Artifices series. But because before Lucy and Grace got Malcolm kind of involved in this, he literally never would have known Annabelle Blackthorne was dead. He never would have even really, probably not even considered necromancy in the first place, just because of the way they had to convince him to try it, because they didn't think Jesse Blackthorne deserved death, which, you know, he didn't. He was invaded by Belial. He should have known the truth, but again, mixing it with the necromantic services was definitely a recipe for absolute disaster. A small thing, I'm going to talk about Alistair and Thomas a little bit, not too much, but I really just hate the way Alistair told Thomas that they could never work out because of the Merry Thieves' hatred for Alistair. And I know he was trying to not be selfish by doing that, but in a way it kind of was, because when you think about it, he decided to tell Thomas this after they decided to make out for hours in the sanctuary, and now he's like, oh wait, never mind, can't do it. Now, the whole book, I will say, was quite the masterpiece, but it all really ended up, this is gonna sound kind of bad, but it all ended up feeling really insignificant once you get to the last, like, 100 pages, because just so much went wrong so fast, and it almost makes me sick to my stomach. Like, whatever had happened to Lucy when she fainted after bringing Jesse back from the dead, I don't even really know if that's what was going on. That's what it seemed like it, but she passed out and lost all her energy. Now I don't know what's going on with her. And the way Daisy and James left off, the way she fled to Paris with Matthew, like I mentioned before, and because he overheard James's and Grace's conversation and totally misunderstood because James was an idiot. Also, going back to Daisy and Matthew going to Paris and the no drinking promise, I thought was very interesting, and a huge part of me believes that that promise will not hold up very well, especially considering they're going to be sleeping in separate hotel rooms, according to what Matthew had said, because he could easily sneak a drink in his hotel room and Daisy would never know. Yeah, and then probably if she did find out, Daisy would get really mad at him and there might be a fallout between them, and maybe she'll go back to Paris and mend things with James, but who knows. Oh, and don't even get me started on the fact that Lilith tricked Daisy into making her paladin, and now Daisy doesn't even ever want to fight or train again, because every time she pulls a weapon out. She's gonna summon Lilith. Moving on to James's and Matthew's relationship, I just wanted to kind of talk about how you can kind of look back on the novel and the series and feel the tension between them, not in just their conversations, but the way they look at each other sometimes, especially on Matthew's end. Because once it's revealed that Matthew loved Daisy, you can kind of see in every interaction that James and Daisy had, Matthew was kind of like really tense and holding it back and very upset. Because, you know, Matthew knew that James didn't love her, or, you know, he thought he didn't love her because of Grace's bracelet power. And he didn't want James playing with Daisy's feelings, obviously, because he knew that Daisy deserved better than that, especially after witnessing them in the Whispering Room in the first novel. And I put 2 separate page numbers down in on this note, and so I guess I'm gonna read some quotes to you guys. I'll see what pages they are on. This quote is on page 418. Let's see. Oh yeah, so this does have to do with James's and Matthew's tension building up because of Cordelia and the fact that Matthew thought that James didn't love Cordelia and Cordelia deserved better. But basically they're having that fight in the alley and James called Matthew a drunk, and Matthew smashes the bottle on the wall and says, "I don't want to see you ruin your life, but if you don't love Cordelia, you should let someone else love her," which was sort of like a and then the other page number, it was page 634. Oh yes, the way because he understands that James doesn't love Cordelia, or, you know, he thought he didn't. It's all very confusing if you haven't read this. Cordelia had just made it to Matthew's flat because she overheard Grace and James talking, and so he goes, "Cordelia," he said, and there was genuine shock in his voice. "Has something happened? Is James in trouble?" "No," Cordelia whispered. "James is well, and very happy, I think." Something in Matthew's expression changed. His gaze flickered. He stood back, opening the door wider. "Come in." And that was sort of just like, you know, I feel like his and Cordelia's relationship really took off in this book because they bonded literally over the fact that James was kind of dumb, and obviously other secrets as well. But, you know, it all just sort of felt like you're witnessing all of this happen, and then you look back on every other event that's happened between James and Matthew, and you can feel that there is tension, especially on Matthew's part. Like, he's trying not to be angry with James, like, throughout the entire series, basically. Okay, moving on. I think the worst part about all of this is that usually when I read Cassandra Clare's books and their endings, I'm usually really sad and I'm crying and it's tragic, but this time it wasn't even necessarily that I was just sad. I was more frustrated and angry and almost sick to my stomach more than anything, because literally everything that you can imagine going wrong went wrong. You know, it wasn't just someone dying, it wasn't just that, you know, Cordelia and James had a fallout. No, it was literally everything. Everything went wrong, everything fell apart. And now I have no idea how the 3rd book is going to start and how things are going to mend. And it's extremely frustrating as a reader. In a good way, because obviously it's a cliffhanger, it's suspenseful, but it just gets me so angry. And the one last thing I did want to talk about is that I'm just so curious as to what James meant when he said that he wanted to tell Cordelia the meaning of the globe necklace that he got her, because at the time they were bonding over travel and like wanting to travel the world, maybe together. I don't really remember if they meant together or just in general. So he got her that globe necklace to, you know, be like, "Oh yeah, this is so that you know that we want to travel one day," or whatever. But then towards the end of the book, he was like, "Yeah, and then I want to tell you the meaning." Well, he didn't say this directly to her, I don't think. I think he said it to himself. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he said that he wanted to tell her the secret meaning and the real meaning of what the globe necklace meant. And that really confused me because it wasn't a super significant part of the plot, at least not at first. It is obviously now because it's a secret. But yeah, it was sort of just like a passing by type of thing. It was like, here's a necklace because we were talking about travel, and then now it's just a big secret that we don't know about. Yeah, and I have no idea what that could be, and it's driving me crazy. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. That was pretty much all that I had written in my notes, and it was all I could think about at the time of writing them up. If you guys have any other thoughts or, you know, interesting things to say about the book, or how you felt about reading it and how you felt at the end of it, go ahead and leave them in the comments below, and I'll definitely talk to you guys about them down there. If you haven't already, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and follow me on all my social media linked in the description below. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Bye!